time. So thank you all for coming. We'll make a start promptly today. I'm Claire Selby, and the theme today is making all children bilingual with English, future or fantasy. So the first question I'd like to ask is, could we have a show of hands so I know which side of the debate you're on, whether you think it's the future, whether you believe it's fantasy, or if you're undecided. So maybe first of all, who thinks it is the future? Okay, quite a good show of hands there. How about who thinks it's just fantasy? Not possible. Okay, cool. And who's undecided? Right, well, so today there's an opportunity to explore this as a topic a little further. You can't hear at the back? Is that difficult to hear? Yes, or you can? Is it okay?
Yes, okay.
Yes? Okay. Just shout if I lose volume, because I've been talking a lot over the last couple of days and the microphone I think is on. But I do like to gesture, so I'll speak just without it if I may. Would you like a seat? There's just a couple of spaces at the front here. Yes. Oh yes, okay. Right. Cozy. Okay, there's just a couple more seats at the front if you'd like to be comfortable, we can fit you in. So we've just taken a poll for those of you who've just arrived, and there's a mixed audience. I think the majority was just in favour of the future, but there are quite a lot who were undecided. So we'll see what we get through today and conclude at the end, perhaps. Well, the first thing I felt is this has been quite a controversial topic for the last few years. It seems to be a buzzword at IATEFL this year, but I felt that when I was preparing this, the first thing we should do is look at a definition for children, because there seem to be lots of opinions about what bilingualism represents, and the question is, what does that mean if we're talking about young children? So this definition is from Professor Olpinska of Warsaw University Linguistics Department, who has spent quite a long time looking into bilingualism in children. And so I asked her to help me for this presentation with a definition. And she felt that there were four main features for a bilingual element of language approach in children. The first one was to, as you might expect, be exposed to two languages from a very early age. And the definition of very early also can depend who you speak to, but most voices are in favour of from birth, but at the latest by age 3. And the research would indicate that the window of learning opportunity for languages is best between the ages of 0 and 7. I won't go into detail there, some of you may be familiar with that research, but if you'd like more information about that, do come and speak to me afterwards. I'm just going to crack on today fast because of the limited time. But the second point that she raised was they were able to learn about subjects in both languages. And I thought that was very interesting because it's using language as a means to learn other things, not learning languages as a subject in itself, which particularly at this age seems more appropriate. And number 3, now at first that looks perhaps unexpected, feel themselves to be bilingual. Do the children feel themselves to be bilingual? And then I remembered that my own children had actually grown up bilingual, not because we were a bilingual household, but because we as an English family were living abroad and they were exposed daily to the local language outside the home. And that leads quite well to the last point, because they did feel themselves to be bilingual, even though they weren't, of course, completely, equally bilingual. And point 4 here says that they were able to operate at a similar standard in both languages. So Professor Olpinska didn't suggest that they were going to be absolutely equal in their knowledge of language, but they felt themselves able to operate at a similar standard. And certainly with my own children, when they felt themselves to be bilingual, it was because they could understand enough in both languages to be able to join in and take part, and they could communicate enough in both languages to get what they wanted and to share what they wanted to share. So I thought that that as a flexible definition was quite helpful. But that leads us on to say, well, if we were to try to make this a feature rather than a fantasy, what kind of steps would we take? What would we, how would we start? And I wondered if there were any suggestions that from your experience you found has worked with young learners. Well, how would we start to try to make them bilingual? Any thoughts on that?
Expose them to the language.
Expose them to the language, exactly. Expose them to the language, yes. And about when they should start?
I think very early.
Exactly, very, very early. Yes.
It depends, like if it's your child, my daughter, she's bilingual, but my students come to me at the age of 4, so there's a difference there.
There is.
So it depends on what, how old the children come to you.
Yes, yes.
If they're students.
Good, great. Well, we put some ideas together based also on research including some from Laura Ann Petito, who's a very expert in the area of bilingualism and has been for many years. But the conclusion seemed to be to start early as possible, as we've talked about, to have some systematic exposure daily, and in fact daily rather than less regularly. And that's quite a significant point from Professor Petito's research. The third point is not so much from research as from market experience, where we find that children who have been exposed to 2 languages, whether it's because they've lived abroad or they have the languages within the family, feel that the other language is natural. It doesn't feel foreign. It feels like a normal part of their daily lives. And then the fourth point was to learn the languages in parallel, which if you start early enough, you can start at a very low level or additional language, so that you can encourage the children to be learning in parallel. Okay, so why isn't that happening? And we've had language teaching for a very long time, and young learners teaching has been developing for a long time. So I thought we should perhaps look at some of the reasons why bilingualism isn't with us already. Is it because it's fantasy, or is there a more practical reason? And great strides have been made in starting younger. I think the EU was the first area to introduce language learning, particularly English learning, from age 7 in schools. However, the research would tell us that that's still not young enough, and that preschool is really the starting age or before. But this one is a big problem. There simply aren't enough of the fantastic teachers that we're all meeting here at IATEFL to go around if we want to introduce English in preschools as well as in primary and all the other levels. So how do we fill that gap overnight? It's a big ask. And then, of course, if we said, well, don't worry about school, let's do that at home, what about parents? Well, parents aren't teachers for a start, and secondly, if we introduce a second language artificially at home, it can actually cause quite a difficult barrier, as many of you may have found, between children and their parents. And the last thing we want to do is have English cause problems. We want it to be fun. So how can we overcome those problems, and what can we change if we are going to be ambitious? Well, something did change outside these walls. In fact, it was in Poland. Poland discovered that the research was showing that their own results in language success, particularly spoken language, were not as good as they wanted them to be. They were perhaps good at academic writing and grammar exercises, but they really were not comfortable speaking English, and that was a problem. So they decided they would take on board the research and do a large experiment and to make English, or rather a second language, obligatory from age 3 in all preschools. In fact, they didn't choose English, they left it open, but most parents and most preschools have chosen English. Yes, sorry.
But that's teaching. How many lessons a week is that? Like
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's one of the questions. Very good point. Right, we'll note that one down because that we'll come back to. Excellent point. The second change was that they felt they would like to try and stop the additional language being seen as foreign. The very word foreign makes it something that's alien, that's outside, that's not ours, that doesn't really belong with us. It's us and them. So let's change it from being foreign to being a natural part of the preschool day. And so now we'll come on to the case study for Poland and see how they tried to overcome some of those problems and to make a further advance towards this potential future. Now, that decision by the government, which was aiming wider, reaching all preschools and all preschools from age 3, stimulated a group to set up the Bilingual Future Social Education Programme. That's a long title for a movement which wants to make sure that not only children are taught, but they learn and to a bilingual level. So let's set a target, aim higher. So we thought wider with the 3-year-olds, aim higher to actually a bilingual level, not just a starter level. And that organisation felt that, well, you know, there's a lot of talk about bilingualism, so how are you going to make it practical and potentially possible? So after setting the goal, they devised a system for implementation and distribution that could work across the country. And then in order to deliver something in the classroom, they needed to find a creative solution which resulted in the universal preschool course and teacher training. So let's have a look at how they progressed in Poland. So first of all, they said, well, look, we're aiming higher, we're thinking wider, but we're never going to manage this on our own. So we need to work together. And that means setting up a network of patrons and sponsors and participants who will all make this happen on the ground in practice. And the way they needed to do that was to show the benefits that could happen if bilingualism were extended. And the 3 main points were, research has shown that countries with higher standards of English attainment have better records of economic growth. It's also shown that if young people have learned a second language, they are culturally more international and more open. So internationalization becomes easier. And thirdly, this returns to some of the research done by Professor Petito, there are actually shown to be educational advantages for the brain of the child if they learn an additional language early enough. Because although we say it's really easy for children, actually it's hard work, it's just that we don't see it because it's all happening subconsciously. They just need a bit more sleep. And what actually, which is great for mum and dad too. So the educational advantage is that because the brain is looking at 2 different ways of saying the same thing, 2 different systems of grammar, 2 different perhaps styles of self-expression, and absorbing those at a young age, it extends the openness of the child to new ideas, which makes them better problem solvers because they're able to see problems from different angles. As I say, this is research that's now being concluded, and the reports even date back to 2009, so it's not brand new. It's quite well established. So those were the advantages, and so how were they going to get partners? Well, the Bilingual Future Social Education Programme has developed a network of patrons from state media, including here National Television, politicians and local administrators who could see the benefits for their regions, bilingual and specialist schools, and also these teacher training organisations, because clearly that was a big gap in the network that needed to be filled. And then they worked together with the local authorities to introduce a structure for introducing the language to the schools and providing the training. They worked with institutions to train teachers in the use of the materials, but also in helping other institutions to develop. And they use the media and other higher level communicators to get that message across to parents. And this is actually a picture from one of those gatherings of regional institutions. Now, the third point that the Bilingual Future Social Education Programme wanted to reach was the creative delivery, the classroom. How do you actually deliver that language in a bilingual way in the classroom? So they worked together with Yellow House English, and that's a publisher that I am involved with. So I was actually already looking at this path myself, and together we came up with something which we hope is about as flexible as a preschool course could be, so that we try to take into account the different needs of the different audiences and match the needs of teachers in different environments, pupils with different amounts of lesson time, as you mentioned, and also to match the needs of parents at home. And to start with, we thought we'd better make this look reasonably familiar. So the preschool course has the classic structure of 3 levels and 3 years. So here you've got a starter level, which is for 3-year-olds, around some characters called the baby beetles, which are obviously quite young looking and designed for young children. And then there are 2 levels here, level A and level B, with the set of characters called Tom and Kerry. So that was, if you like, the character realization. But actually that's where the similarities end, 3 levels, 3 years. We moved on to say, well, okay, actually we have 3 audiences here. We have to get the teachers, the pupils, and the parents working together as well as part of that team that we talked about, to be able to deliver this, because the research showed that English needs to be delivered a little every day, like getting good at football or getting good at the piano. It's a skill rather than a knowledge. So regular practice is more important than how long each session lasts. So the packs are information for teachers to lead the lessons, a pupils book for pupils to have activities within the classroom, and home learning packs so that the children have home learning at home. And I'll come back to that a little bit later to say how parents can manage, because just to allay any fear straight away, we don't ask parents to teach, just to encourage. So what's the next level? How is it different? Well, the next thing that we realized is that we needed different versions, because even within one country, you can have different levels of delivery. As we said, there aren't enough qualified English teachers, so how could every school offer a foreign language or an additional language if there weren't enough teachers to go around? So we needed a course which could be delivered by qualified teachers, which we call Plus, because that takes advantage of their Plus skills, and involves, as a course usually would in preschool, lots of interactive speech between the teacher and the pupils with the materials. But we also introduced a standard level, and that is for class teachers who haven't been trained in English, so they're not able to operate at the same level as a qualified teacher, but they can play games and run group activities very, very well. So as long as we provide them through the course with the language presentation and the delivery of the core materials in terms of songs and animations, then they can lead activities. And that will be all we are expecting them to do, so that the children get some exposure to the language, they still hear and play with it every day. It's the starting point. And then we found that some bilingual schools and some of those patron schools that the Bilingual Future Social Education Programme recruited were saying, well, look, it's all very well if there's a version for standard classrooms and a version for Plus teachers, but we have 10 hours of English or more per week in our specialist schools, and we really like the characters, we really like the films and the songs. can you give us more material? So we've also developed what we're calling the expert level, which provides additional materials, including storybooks that need more time if the teacher's going to go through them well with the pupils. More plays that again take more time to organise with the pupils. And if there is that time in the curriculum, then the children can be encouraged to reach an even higher level by having greater contact with the language and greater interactivity with the language. Just going to do a time check. So I'll move along quickly here so that we still have some time for questions. And I'll just check, can you still hear me at the back?
Yes.
Yes, great, okay. So this is how those 4 versions work out. And I'll come back to the 4th one. This is the standard version where the materials present basic language through animated adventures that are carefully planned, obviously with a syllabus built in. The plus version is for qualified English teachers that are able to do more and interact more with the pupils. And then the expert version provides more materials so that there can be greater English time built around those same core characters and activities. And I'll just quickly mention, we've also had requests from specialist schools that care for disabled children or children with learning needs at various levels. Again, the core materials that we have are so accessible, they felt that some of their pupils would benefit from it, and they've asked us to work with some of their specialist carers to devise activities so that even they will get some exposure to the benefits of an additional language. But that's next year, and we're not going to be talking any more about that today. But the idea is to make English available on a universal basis. However, this is just the beginning. We also needed to make it multimedia and available digitally because some countries find the print costs too high and they need digital access, which is then available because they actually now have internet quite well established, but it's a lower cost of delivery. The animations, as I would invite you to come and see at the stand, are HD television quality, so it feels like entertainment, and that's what kids these days demand. They're looking to be entertained while they're learning. And as I said, we are making it adaptable to local facilities and budgets, so there are slimmed down versions, which obviously won't achieve quite the same, but will at least give children a start. And the idea that this is just the start. It isn't an overnight solution. It's a way of saying all children could have access to some English and exposure to English from this course. But over time, we would hope that the class teachers would be able to grow with the course and with training to move up and actually want to qualify as English teachers. And then as time becomes more available in the syllabus, in the school timetable, to move on even to the expert level. So that it will be a journey to take us from where we are now, where many children don't have any exposure to English, right through to being able to have English regularly at quite a high level. So that is the plan. That is what is happening in Poland as a case study today. It is a reality today, but only at that start. And we'll have to see in the future whether this bilingual goal can be reached. But hopefully this is a start, which means that it has more chance of being a future rather than a fantasy. So we would aim to give children that opportunity and be ambitious. Now I've just had the signal from the back, spot on time, we have 5 minutes. So hopefully, we've now got a few minutes for questions. Yes?
I do have one, actually, I have 2 questions, because I'm from Poland.
Yes. Would you mind standing up?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. And say your name.
Okay, my name is Agnieszka, I'm from Poland, I'm from Białystok. And I would like to ask about, when will this project cover the whole country? Because I have never heard about it, and my son is 3 years old, and I have never heard about this project.
Okay, well it is very new. It's we've started rolling this out literally over the last year. So it hasn't reached every region yet because we're a small group, and even with the patrons, it's still a developing journey. However, do come and contact us after the presentation. We're on stand 50, and my colleague Waldek here is from Poland, and he has been the coordinator, bringing many of those parties together, and we can perhaps get in touch with your local ODN, your teacher training organisation or whatever, and try and get this introduced in the different regions. As I say, it's a gradual rollout. Yes. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Maria, based in Italy. I run my young consultancies there with the British Council.
Great.
And we found, actually, it's quite hard convincing parents of the merits of this. So whilst you have a body of the school population that are convinced they want to follow this on the track, there's a significant part that don't. There's fear that their Italian language, their mother tongue, will be eroded, for example.
Yeah.
I wonder how you what communication you do around that.
Yes, well, as I mentioned, the Bilingual Future Social Education Programme works also with media. So we've had radio programmes, we've had television documentaries, some of which you can see on the website, and press articles in parenting magazines that explain that those ideas are now known to be, those fears are unfounded, those ideas have now been overtaken by research, and we can offer them new solutions. We also prepared the materials in TV format, HD, so the animations have actually been on national television in Poland, in Russia, in Korea, and we've got a negotiation with CCTV in China for state television, because then the names and the characters are familiar to the parents, they can see what it really looks like, and they go, oh okay, I wasn't sure how that would work, but I can see that that's familiar as a structure and a format. Also, we have with the pack a guide for parents. It's about 100 pages, but it's a quick read in an evening for busy parents. And it basically gives them some advice on saying, don't try and be a teacher, you're not expected to be a teacher, but encourage the pupils, play with your children at home. We give them some ideas of ways, very simple ways to play. And also, in the packs, we have a simple tick box sheet, which enables them to participate by ticking off when their child has listened to a particular song or the next film in the series, so that they can monitor the child's progress and also make sure they don't just watch their favourites, which is another thing. But we give them a role without asking too much. And I know that the attitude of parents is very different in certain countries. In Poland, the parents are very engaged in their children's learning. And in some countries that's more of a challenge than others. But certainly I can give you some ideas. How long are the sessions? Okay, that's also a very good question. And what we wanted to do was to try and be as flexible as possible because timetables differ so much. So in the standard pack, we provide activities and an order in which they should be followed. The presentation of the context with the storyline is always session 1, and that can be 15 minutes to half an hour. So once you've established the context, then the other activities, which are typical preschool activities such as songs, games, craft, we put a suggested order, but we also put a time measurement by it. So if they say, you know, second day of the week we always have craft anyway, we don't want craft on that day, then we allow them to swap around, because the order after that doesn't matter. It's just about consolidation and repetition through other activities. However, with the plus version for the expert teachers, again, we know that some teachers have half an hour in each school, some have 45 minutes twice a week, and it's very variable. So again, we put the lesson cards with, present the context on the first session of each new unit, and then again we have timed activities so that the timed elements can be packaged together to whichever kind of time they have available. And since you raised that point, if we've still got a minute or two before they throw us out, is that 1 minute?
No.
No? Okay, 2 minutes. Oh, another question. we have actually designed it with a table so that where a teacher is visiting twice a week, so the children have the benefit of a qualified teacher, but no one on the other 3 days. We say combine the plus and the standard package. So the qualified teacher presents the language, does the interactive work with the children, and on the other days, the class teacher says, okay, let's have the English song, or let's have the English simple activity, and can work from the standard sheet. So they still get their little bit of English daily, again by working together. And we found that in Poland, the teachers from the different types of schools have been very happy to do that. While we have a couple of minutes, any more questions? Those are the main questions. Okay, in that case, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you to our stand at 50. If you have more things that you think of later, we're here all week. And just one final thought, if I could leave you with it. Maybe in the 50th year of IATEFL, we could suggest that the F for foreign is replaced and we make it International Association of Teachers of English for All. As a thought to take with.
See you later. Yeah. Now we gotta talk.
Ja, want dat heb je dan wel. Als je denkt, dan heb je gewoon echt niks met je leven. Ik heb wel het gevoel dat mensen ineens ver.